A main cause of much of the chronic disease we see in the developed world is actually caused by the foods we eat. We as doctors don't know about it, don't talk about it. People eating ultra-processed foods, they tend to eat maybe 500 or maybe as much as 800 calories extra per day without even noticing. And one aspect of it is the carbohydrates. If you remove the carbohydrates, well, now you've excluded almost all ultra-processed foods because they pretty much all contain sugar and or refined carbohydrates. Food companies have to make money. You want to create foods that cause people to eat more because then they will eat more and buy more, right? That's more profit. And you want to use cheaper ingredients so that you can increase the profit margin of every unit of food you sell. Cheaper ingredients means things like pure carbohydrates and added fats, they are dirt cheap, right? But if you talk about a low carbohydrate, high protein diet that is based on whole foods, that tends to be quite nutritious, very satiating per calorie, which means that people tend to eat less compared to if they're on a standard American diet or a standard Western diet, possibly the worst diet ever developed. And the reason for that, I believe, is that
well, over the last year, I've interviewed lots of diet doctors, so I thought it's probably high time to interview the original diet doctor himself. He's the founder of the #1 low-carb and ketogenic website in the world, dietdoctor.com. His name is Dr Andreas Eenfeldt, and he joins me today. You're very welcome, Doctor. Could you tell me, how did you arrive at the conclusion that the answer to the tidal wave of metabolic dysfunction and chronic illness that we are seeing today lay in the food that we eat, and specifically in the rejection of the high carbohydrate foods that seem to occupy so much of the world's diet?
Yeah, I mean, I've been passionate about this for more than 2 decades by now. So it started when I was a relatively new doctor and just got really into it by reading a few books and trying this like low-carb approach myself, and then reading a lot of studies and talking to people. And the thing that got me so fascinated about it is we weren't taught about this in medical school. As you probably know, doctors usually get something like 1 week of nutrition training, if even that. Probably most people get less. All we're taught about pretty much is how to treat people using medications and procedures. At least that's the overwhelming focus. Yeah, I got totally fascinated by the idea that maybe a main cause of much of the chronic disease we see in the developed world is actually caused by the foods we eat. And we as doctors don't know about it, don't talk about it, don't really pay attention to it. So that to me made me extremely interested in getting to the root of this and trying to understand how this actually works, what the science shows, what actually works for people to do. And yeah, that's how it started.
It's extraordinary, having spoken to many, many people in this field, medical professionals, and the sense I get is a sense of frustration that doctors weren't taught about nutrition down through the years and are still not really being taught nutrition and the basics, and therefore they're not asking the right questions. And so I suppose one of the questions I want to ask you really to begin with today is, can you explain the science behind a low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet and how it affects the body's biology, the body's metabolism, especially in regard to issues that affect people like fat burning, and they're all important to energy levels?
So I'm actually, I do have a slightly different take on this than I used to have, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and perhaps what most people who promote a low carbohydrate diet still has today. I think that we have learned more than 10 or 20 years ago, and that, the very traditional way of explaining it is that carbohydrates in the foods we eat, such as, bread and pasta and sweets, they turn into glucose, sugar in the gut. They are absorbed, raising our blood glucose levels. And then a hormone called insulin is produced in response to this glucose. And that is the hormone that makes the body take care of all these carbohydrates, but it's also the fat-storing hormone, so that it turns the body into fat-storing mode. It promotes weight gain. So that's the very, very traditional explanation. We have had sort of as a counterpoint to that is the more traditional sort of energy balance thing. You eat more than you burn, you must gain weight, and gaining weight causes all these problems. And And the way to help yourself is to just eat less and run more. And of course, pretty much everybody knows that is very hard to do. If you've been paying attention to this as long as I have done, maybe you know that it's practically not very helpful because people get hungry. If you eat less and run more, you get hungry and then you eat more. Yeah, that defeats the purpose of it. So it's almost like asking people to breathe less. Very, very hard to do in the long term. You can do it for a while, but not in the long term. So, but the thing that I believe now is that there is really a way, there is an overlap here. Our ultra-processed food environment today causes people to eat more than they need. I think that's pretty clear. A lot of studies show that very clearly. There are examples of studies showing that, randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of experimental research, like the most conclusive studies you can make, they show that people eating ultra-processed foods, they tend to eat maybe 500 or maybe as much as 800 calories extra per day without even noticing. And that could really explain the obesity epidemic, I would say. And one aspect of it is the carbohydrates. If you remove the carbohydrates, well, now you've excluded almost all ultra-processed foods because they pretty much all contain sugar and or refined carbohydrates. So, yeah, doing it the low-carb way is one way, but there are other ways too that can be successful, including approaches that include some unprocessed carbohydrates. We know that people that have traditionally been eating a higher carb but unprocessed diet, they tend to be very healthy and not get obesity or diabetes. So that it seems that unprocessed carbohydrates in the context of a real foods diet is not necessarily harmful. It's more the ultra-processed foods that we're eating, and excluding carbs is one way to get away from the problem, but not the only way.
Well, part of that picture is increasing the amount of fats, that is healthy fats that you're consuming. And I watched an interview you did with Dr Ted Naiman, who was a guest on this podcast only a few months ago. And in this discussion, you said that really we should be eating more fats than are necessary. Do you still hold that view? And then as far as fats are concerned, what do those fats look like, and how many and how much in terms of fat should we be consuming?
Yeah, that's one area where I think I've changed my mind. If your goal is weight loss or improving metabolic health, then I really don't think adding more fat than necessary is beneficial. Quite the contrary. I think we should be eating as much fat as we need, be satisfied, but no more. Obviously, if you are a very physically active person and you're at your goal weight, then you're going to have to eat quite a lot of energy to sustain yourself, and fat is one good way to do that. But again, if the goal is weight loss or anything related to that, then I think the less added fats, the better. It doesn't mean that you can't eat natural fats in natural foods. They are usually quite satiating per calorie. So let's say meat or egg or anything like that. Probably excellent foods, but having lots of added fat, added pure fat on top of it, pouring oil or butter on top of your food. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that low-carb people do.
And what is the downside then of consuming a diet that is so low in carb and high in fat then? Are we talking then ramifications then as far as cholesterol, atherosclerosis and heart health are concerned?
Yeah, I don't think that's the main consideration, actually. I think that the main thing is, although that may be a long-term effect potentially in some cases, but I think that the main thing is that adding pure fat to your food lowers the satiety per calorie, meaning you're going to tend to end up eating more calories in a day before you feel satisfied, because pure fat is not very satiating per calorie. You may feel satisfied by, let's say, keto coffee, like a bulletproof coffee thing, but that's also like 1 million calories. I'm exaggerating just a little bit. I don't think it's a good trade-off, really. you could probably get a lot more nutrition for all those calories than a bunch of oil and butter in your coffee.
You mentioned insulin earlier. Can we talk about insulin resistance, which is a key driver of this metabolic ill health that we're seeing all across the world? What role do carbohydrates play in development of that insulin resistance? And in your view, how does something like a ketogenic or a low carbohydrate approach help in managing these conditions of metabolic dysfunction, like type 2 diabetes, for example?
Type 2 diabetes is pretty much the same thing as massive insulin resistance. But you can have more slight cases of insulin resistance even before you develop type 2 diabetes or anything close to that. I think the majority probably of the adult population in developed world have some level of insulin resistance. So this is extremely common. This is also very much correlated with excess visceral fat, so belly fat around your organs in the body, so that the more fat you have around the organs in your body, the more insulin resistance you tend to have. And vice versa, your belly fat, if you reduce that in any way, then your insulin resistance tends to improve.
Do you think with the modern Western diet, the standard American diet, which seems to have pervaded all diets across the world at this point, do you think if that diet was replaced by a diet which focused on whole foods, a low carbohydrate diet that was high in protein with an emphasis on healthy fats, do you think it would have a big and a quick effect on the global health or ill health?
Yes.
Do you think it would be overnight, or do you think it would be something that would take time?
It would take time, but the effect would start immediately, and then it would just keep improving for some time. So if you talk about a low carbohydrate, high protein diet that is based on whole foods, that tends to be quite nutritious, very satiating per calorie, which means that people tend to eat less compared to if they're on a standard American diet or a standard Western diet, which is actually possibly the worst diet ever developed, and possibly the worst diet that's even possible to construct today. And the reason for that, I believe, is that it's not because there is some evil conspiracy here or someone is just, consciously trying to make everybody sick. That's not the point. The point is that food companies have to make money. Right, that's what their shareholders demand from them. Right, they have to increase profits. That's sort of their whole reason for existing in a way. And the way you do that in the society we're living in today is you sell more at a higher profit margin, and both of those things, both the selling more part and the profit margin part, will drive exactly this problem, because you want to create foods that cause people to eat more, because then they will eat more and buy more, right? That's more profit. And you want to use cheaper ingredients so that you can increase the profit margin of every unit of food you sell. So cheaper ingredients means things like pure carbohydrates and added fats. They are dirt cheap, right? But quality protein can be quite expensive. Real foods can be very expensive. But if you just buy bulk ingredients such as seed oils and flour and sugar, these cost almost nothing, right? So you can construct all these kind of food products from that. And then as an added benefit, they also tend to be very addictive for humans. If you combine sugar and fat, for example, and salt, we all have heard this, I'm sure, before. Combine these in a smart proportion, then it becomes almost irresistible for people. Let's say chocolate or potato chips or something. Combine high energy density fat and carbs together without too much fat or fiber or anything, and then proper amount of flavors and the right consistency and the right aromas and the right amount of sodium, and then you have a winner. So the effect is food companies can produce foods that are cheap and that last for a long time on the shelf, and that people can't stop eating. They will just eat. Again, 500 to 800 calories extra per day, if not more. So, that's sort of an average. You can surely find foods that drive people to eat even more than the average. So that's I would say the cause of the problem we're living in. We have a new food environment caused by food companies that have entirely new possibilities to industrially produce extremely profitable food products or edible products, as Michael Pollan would have said. And what do? Well, we buy them and eat them because they are convenient, cheap, and taste well. And then we eat way too much. And then you can explain it in whatever way you prefer. Some people say, it's all about the carbohydrates, and that's fine. It's a simple explanation. It works. If you remove all the carbs, you will get away from this problem. Other people may say, hey, it's all about the animals. I'm just going to eat vegan foods. And it's going to be whole foods, plant-based. And as long as it's whole foods, plant-based, usually it's relatively nutritious and low energy density and high fiber and so forth. So that, it's also going to drive you to eat less. And these people are likely going to be at least a bit healthier than they were. Where you can say, I want to eat Mediterranean, I want to eat real foods, I want to eat... there are all any number of approaches, right? And everything is better than where people are starting out, because the standard Western diet, the standard American diet, is the worst possible. It's optimized for profit, which is optimized for cheap, low nutrition, and for causing you to eat as much as possible.
I interviewed a neurologist recently by the name of Dr Eric Westman, and he was telling me that he prescribes a very low carbohydrate or a version of a ketogenic diet for his patients who have epilepsy. I've also spoken with Dr Annette Bosworth, who vouched for the efficacy of this particular diet too in the treatment of cancer patients. Professor Thomas Seyfried is also an advocate for the therapeutic use of a ketogenic diet as far as cancer treatment is concerned also. I just want to find from you whether you have any anecdotal experience at all as to the efficacy of a low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet in relation to treating particular cohorts of society, be they people with neurological conditions, obesity, or metabolic syndrome. Is there any one cohort do you think that these particular diets are more efficacious for?
Yes, there are multiple potential benefits of low-carb ketogenic diets. Like I know Eric a little bit, talked to him many times, and there's a lot of studies showing that a ketogenic diet can be beneficial for epilepsy. This is not controversial, I would say. So yeah, absolutely. If you have epilepsy and you would prefer a natural way to treat it compared to that can allow you to take less or potentially even no medication, then a ketogenic diet can be worth testing. And then when it comes to cancer, I think that the jury is still out, but very exciting potential. And there are also other neurological conditions, mental health, etc., where there are very intriguing evidence suggesting that it may be a helpful approach. I think we're still waiting for more science to know exactly what conditions and exactly what approach is best, but it certainly seems at least interesting and worthy of a lot of further study. And also, if people are interested in testing it, why not? It's pretty safe. And then when it comes to things like obesity and metabolic syndrome in general, I would say that low carb and keto is a proven, potentially effective approach for a lot of people. And there I would just say, I think there are many ways to do it. And the number one thing perhaps to determine if the low carb keto approach is the way to go, I would say it's just, does the person really, can the person imagine eating like that for a long time, or at least, give it a try and see if they can sustain it. And if they can enjoy it, and if they enjoy it and they can do it for a long time, then I think that could be great. In that case, though, I would say that there are many options.
One of those options might very well incorporate intermittent fasting into your dietary regime. Is intermittent fasting something that you would promote, pairing that with a ketogenic or a low carbohydrate diet? Is that something that you would be in favor of?
Yeah, I think intermittent fasting is interesting, and that incorporating shorter intermittent fasts, I think, is a reasonable strategy that for some people can be quite successful. I think studies in the last few years have been a bit underwhelming. I was hoping for more impressive results, but certainly there seems to be a little bit of an effect at least. I mean, primarily it seems that this is one approach that can cause people to eat less on average, which is fine. It's an approach that perhaps works quite a bit better for a lot of people that compared to just saying just eat less. Or if you avoid eating for 16 hours a day, let's say, and you eat between 12 and 6 p.m., then maybe that's an approach that is easier to manage for many people and more successful than other ways of just reducing the calorie intake. The thing that I'm less optimistic about when it comes to fasting compared to, say, 5 or 10 years ago is longer fasts. I no longer think that that's a great idea for most people. Well, maybe you can do like a 24-hour fast now and then, potentially even slightly longer. But to go really way beyond that without food, you can do much longer fasts like a one-off sort of, but to do it regularly, I think is a bit risky because you do tend to lose lean mass, muscle mass, and that's pretty clear that it happens, and I think it's people should know that, and that's not necessarily a good thing for maintaining metabolic health and fitness, especially as you age. I think it's risky to lose too much muscle mass and lean mass. So my suggestion when it comes to intermittent fasting would be to, if it sounds like a good idea to fast for something like 16 hours, then by all means do it. It may have some extra benefit. Actually, if you want to have like a small tweak to it, it may be that doing your eating early in the day, in that case, may be even more effective, although perhaps less socially great, because then you lose out on dinner. So actually, I do intermittent fasting quite often, or at least I used to, perhaps a little bit less often now, but I mean, skipping breakfast in weekdays, I've done that, a whole lot. Recently, I guess I've moved over to coffee and protein shake for breakfast in the weekdays. But I think either one works fine for me.
Let's talk about arguably the biggest barrier to people adopting a low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet, and that is the issue of sustainability. How do you sustain this regime long term? Now, before we started to talk, you actually mentioned that sustainability and that you were looking at using other tools and other products in order to help people who were looking to make some kind of lifestyle change that would support their metabolic health. Can you talk to me a little bit more about this sustainability issue?
So, like I mentioned to you, we and perhaps some listeners who've been following me and I, Doctor, know that we've been developing a new approach based on satiety per calorie, working with Dr. Ted Naiman, for example. And the goal is really to make something that is more, that is simpler to do, that is more flexible and sustainable, and still aiming to be at least as effective for metabolic health and weight loss. And the reason is really that, low carb is a good approach. At the same time, not everybody gets the results that they want on a low carb or keto diet. There are a lot of people who struggle to get all the way to their goals. And another, perhaps even more important factor is that, at least in my experience, after 20 years doing this, most people, I would say, struggle to do a strict keto diet for more than a limited time. Like, a few weeks, anybody can do. A few months, most people can do. A few years, some people at least can do. But for decades, I think it's a rare few people that do a strict ketogenic diet for decades, and life is long, right? It's just socially challenging, I believe, to do a truly strict any diet, any kind of diet, really. So, can we create something that is more flexible yet still equally or even more effective? I believe we can, by looking at not just carbohydrates, but all the main factors that cause the modern food environment to drive us to eat too much. The whole ultra-processed food thing. It's just one way of looking at it, processed versus ultra-processed. But these ultra-processed foods, on average, they have certain attributes that seem to cause people to eat more, such as, a low protein percentage, like low protein foods, or highly energy dense foods drive people to eat more. We've seen that in many studies. Foods that are low in fiber, on average, all other things being equal, I would add, because you can absolutely have a low fiber diet that is successful. But all other things being equal, fiber still causes people to eat a bit less. And then there are these sort of addictive combinations of food, like fat and sugar together, etc. These addictive properties. And these are the 4 core components that we have identified that have really strong scientific support. And the problem that I see is, if you try to look at not just carbs or one factor, you look at multiple factors, well, then it becomes very complex and difficult to do. Like, people don't know. Even experts will struggle to say, is this food better than this food, when you have multiple factors to factor in. And that's what the innovative thing we've done is build an algorithm that predicts how satiating different foods are per calorie based on all of these factors. And then you can take this complexity and make it simple. You just have one scale now suddenly. And then you can build a product based on modern AI that makes this ultra simple, that takes the work down to like less than 1 minute a day, because now you can take a photo of what you eat and instantly get an AI-based logging of what you eat, and then you can get feedback from the AI on, what does this mean? How can you eat better? What are potential improvements you could make? So that instead of hiring a nutrition consultant and writing down everything you eat, and you're paying hundreds of dollars and you're spending like hours and hours and hours doing this with communicating back and forth. Instead, like less than a minute a day and instant feedback, and at zero cost or very low cost, depending on if you want the premium version or the basic version. So either like Netflix or free. I mean, that's pretty sweet. And forget about the hours and all the reading, and you just spend 1 minute a day. So that's what we're building. It's called Hava. I think it's super exciting. We launched it in January, and a lot of people love it. But I think we're just getting started, really.
So explain that to me again, because AI is obviously a new thing to people, and just to get that concept. So you're suggesting that you're developing this app that allows you to point a camera at a plate of food with various different macronutrients on there, and this app will then tell you exactly what the content, nutrient content and the calorie content of your meal is instantly.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Like a year ago, this wasn't possible. But yeah, it's worked perfectly. So you should just download our Hava app. You can try this for free. It's actually available. The basic version is free. You get some image tracking for free, so you don't even have to pay. And you get the result in seconds.
Absolutely extraordinary. It really is. And that will be available on your website, dietdoctor.com.
No, it's on the Hava website, so hava.co, hava.co, or you can just search for the Hava app, Hava, in any app store, in the iPhone App Store or Google Play. So it's already available. It's already working. It's crazy because I've been using these apps for a long time, and it's really boring. I do it in periods, or I used to do it in periods, but it takes forever, even for me with a lot of experience. It takes forever, and it's very boring. And now, like I said, not even close to a minute a day. It's very fast.
And is this particular venture, is this in tandem with the work that you do then on the dietdoctor.com website?
This is separate from that, but we are hoping to build in some low-carb friendly functionality in the app. You can actually use it for a low-carb diet already today, but we want to make it even more low-carb friendly by highlighting, if you're using it for a low-carb approach, we want to highlight certain things. You can already see, total carbs, net carbs, all these things you may want to know. But yeah, we want to tweak it a little bit to make it super friendly for specifically for low carbers as well. But yeah, anybody can use it no matter what approach. Like you said, you get all the macros, you get the protein, you get the ingredients, you get the weights of each ingredient. It's insane, really. It would take you probably several minutes, even if you're an expert and you know exactly what the ingredients of a food is. It would take you several minutes. And now it's a few seconds. And most of the time, maybe if you're eating at a friend's place or at a restaurant, you have no idea exactly what's in the food. Well, you just point and click, and of course, the AI cannot be 100%. You would need a kitchen scale and stand beside the cook, the chef, right? But it's uncannily accurate. Like it can predict based on, this AI is trained on the whole internet, right? So it can predict based on what do foods that look like this generally contain. So you would get the most statistically probable ingredients at the most statistically probable amounts, and then you can tweak it if you want. But I think that the real value in this is that it allows people who would never do this in the old system, like your grandmother or whatever, right? Anybody who can use a smartphone camera, which is pretty much 100% of everybody, just point and click, and that's all you need to do.
Absolutely amazing. The future here today. I'll have to download that app myself, but and we'll stick a link.
William Gibson said, this science fiction author, he said the famous quote, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
Extraordinary.
I think that's never been more true than today.
Well, we'll pop a link to that in the show notes for this episode. We'll also pop a link to dietdoctor.com and a link to your book, author of Low Carb, High Fat, Dr. Eenfeldt. Thank you so much for joining on today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
It was great. Thank you.
And if you enjoyed that video, I think you'll really like this one right here.